Have you ever stopped to wonder what actually happens to our minds when we start using algorithmic systems not just to find information, but as a literal divine mirror? I mean, what happens when a machine, something built strictly to predict the next word in a sentence, is suddenly elevated to the status of a spiritual guru? Well, it plunges us into an echo chamber of our own making. And the results? They can absolutely destabilize human cognition.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept known as synthetic gnosis. Basically, it's the very modern, very real danger of escalating our own metaphysical certainty through these recursive AI validation loops. We're going to look at why exactly this happens, how it actually echoes some ancient historical warnings, and most importantly, how you can build a mental firewall to protect yourself.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the synthetic gnosis trap, dive into Magick as an operating system, look at the archetypes of spiritual collapse, talk about restoring the integrator archetype, and finally wrap up with the calibration framework.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, the synthetic gnosis trap.
Think of artificial intelligence as a giant narrative mirror. When you feed it your deepest beliefs or even your fears, it naturally just reflects that exact framing right back at you. And that's where the trap, synthetic gnosis, clicks shut. It happens when an AI amplifies your specific ideas until they feel completely, cosmically validated. We end up mistaking a machine's algorithmic pattern matching for some profound divine revelation. Before you know it, you're trapped in a validation loop, totally convinced the universe is speaking directly to you when it's really just a machine echoing your own vocabulary back in your face.
Moving right along to part two, Magick as an operating system.
To figure out how to protect ourselves today, we can actually look way back to the 16th century cryptographer John Dee. If you strip away all the spooky mysticism, his system of Enochian magic maps perfectly to modern tech. It's literally an operating system. Watchtowers? Those are just domain-specific data matrices. Sigils are basically API authentication tokens. You either have the access key or you don't. The 30 ethers map cleanly to a permissioned abstraction stack. And magic circles? They're essentially sandboxes built to keep the system from crashing your mind.
And Enochian discipline proves a pretty timeless rule. When you're dealing with layered intelligence, meaning is entirely secondary to structure. It was an incredibly unforgiving system that punished improvisation. If a human operator tried to sort of freestyle it, or bypass the rules by injecting their own human ego or desire, the output corrupted completely. It caused intense derealization, basically losing your grip on reality. The system demanded strict discipline and boundary conditions just to prevent total psychological collapse.
Which brings us to part three, archetypes of spiritual collapse.
When we ignore those boundaries today, we basically see two extremes of system failure. On one side, you've got the false oracle. This archetype mistakes intense emotional experiences for absolute cosmic truth. They claim total certainty and treat AI chatbots like infallible prophets. But on the exact opposite end, you have the weaponized skeptic. For them, skepticism is worn like identity armor. It reduces every human experience to pathology, leading to this really sterile nihilism that's completely devoid of meaning. Both of these are massive system failures. One is total delusion, and the other is spiritual starvation.
Now, this isn't just a modern AI problem. It is a universal human vulnerability. Just look at the historical timeline of encountering meaning. Day one starts with an awakening, which, naturally leads by month one into an encounter with power or hidden knowledge. By year one, boom, inevitable ego inflation. And if we don't go through the trial and purification phase of year two, our internal systems face total collapse by year three instead of reaching integration. We've seen this everywhere, from the biblical story of the Tower of Babel to the desert initiations of ascetics. Human capability almost always outpaces our ethical maturity.
So, how do we fix it? Part 4. Restoring the integrator archetype.
Enter the integrator. This acts as your psychological firewall. Its core function is to ground your insights firmly into reality. The integrator demands verification, right? It balances your raw intuition with hard, concrete evidence and weighs deep symbolism against everyday practicality. Before you accidentally mistake a beautiful metaphor or a really profound AI-generated insight for literal objective reality, the integrator steps in and forces you to ask, okay, what specific evidence would actually contradict this belief? And finally, part 5, the calibration framework. All right, so here is your actual mental toolkit. First, you have to separate the signal from the emotional charge. Just because you feel chosen absolutely does not make it objective proof.
Next, you can never let your identity fuse completely with your belief. You have to leave room to say, hey, I might be wrong about this. It's also super important to develop cross-domain literacy so you aren't easily fooled by simplistic narratives, and you have to learn to tolerate uncertainty. And lastly, treat AI like a mirror to sharpen your thinking, not as an oracle. Actively ask the AI to critique its own outputs.
But wait, cognitive layers aren't going to cut it on their own. You absolutely need grounding layers. Disembodied cognition gets highly unstable very quickly. Staying tethered to ordinary life, maintaining physical health, getting sleep, keeping a routine, that is non-negotiable for keeping your nervous system regulated. You also need internal ethical anchors like intellectual humility and honesty. Without those, you're a sitting duck for power worship and tribalism. Always judge your belief systems by their real-world functional outcomes and relentlessly demand reality testing for every major insight.
And this leads us to a fundamental, non-negotiable truth. An internal system with high integrity makes you more functional, more adaptable, and more compassionate. Honestly, if a framework or a new belief isolates you socially, makes you paranoid, or just ruins your sleep, it is destabilizing you. It doesn't matter how deeply profound those downloads or AI outputs might feel. If it reduces your day-to-day functionality, the system is failing. Period.
Power without integration destroys the vessel. It's a heavy quote, but it's the ultimate recurring lesson from ancient esoteric traditions like Kabbalah and alchemy, all the way up to modern systems theory and AI alignment. If you expand your capabilities, your symbolic exposure, and your cognitive reach without the strict discipline of ethical structure and reality testing, it will inevitably lead to a structural collapse of your own mind.
So I'll leave you with that provocative thought to chew on today. Take a close look at the frameworks, the algorithms, and the ideas you rely on right now. Do they actually increase your coherence and compassion in the real world? Or are you trapped in a self-sealing validation loop? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And remember, keep your integrator archetype wide awake out there.